Chapter 19. Conclusions. During the reign of Joseph Stalin, millions of Soviet citizens were forced from their homes and sent off to labor camps. One of these citizens, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, later wrote about these experiences, exploring themes such as courage, fear, and the collective failure to act against tyranny. He and his fellows in the labor camps, pondering their awful predicament there and reflecting on their failure to resist when faced with the prospect of unjust arrest, wondered what would have happened if they had stood up to the state's officers who came to apprehend them. If enough people would have united in resistance, Stalin's plans likely would have been thwarted. After all, the number of citizens was vastly more than the number of officers that carried out the orders. Instead, possessing no vision to resist or respond to such tyrannical behavior, millions capitulated and were exiled to the labor camps. Solzhenitsyn later wrote, quote, "The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world." Part of my interest in compiling this presentation on skepticism, sources of information, and the pursuit of truth is that a critical mass of fearful and propagandized people can cooperate with scenarios that harm themselves and even impose negative conditions on the rest of society. History shows us again and again that propaganda happens, that populations are easily swayed, that collective hysteria is a real thing. We look back at historical tragedies and wonder why the population followed that leader, did those things, or believed in a certain way of life that today, to us, looks so plainly wrong. Would they have done differently if they had different information? Centuries ago, bloodletting was a common practice in the pursuit of health, accepted by the mass of society, yet was eventually understood to be harmful and finally discarded after the passage of time. In mid-19th century Europe, Dr. Semmelweis urged the habit of hand-washing to his colleagues after he realized that patients were dying when being contaminated by doctors who did not wash hands in between certain types of visits. For a variety of reasons, Semmelweis became a controversial figure in his immediate surroundings, and many in the medical elite ignored or scoffed at him and did not heed his advice during his lifetime. Later, all of society came to understand Semmelweis was right. In mid-20th century America, cigarette companies convinced the public that cigarettes were safe by arranging for doctors to endorse these products in advertisements. Would you believe even as these companies privately had in-house scientific evidence of the dangers of smoking? Around the same time, the insecticide DDT was sprayed liberally in the vicinity of humans and even infused into wallpaper in rooms where children slept. Until Rachel Carson published a book to expose its harms, which eventually caused change, but not before Carson was smeared by a negative public relations campaign organized by Monsanto, DDT's manufacturer. You and I might point to current controversies that we believe fall into a similar category. Here's one I'll point to. In 2020, the tremendous influence of the media and the policies of some localities convinced a significant portion of the public to wear masks due to coronavirus. The media and the government neglected to mention that the best scientific research does not support the population-wide use of masks against viruses. We knew this prior to 2020 because studies had been conducted on influenza. But an agenda to push masks developed during COVID, so that's what the government and media pushed, and the public was convinced. In my own town, I saw many people wearing their masks even while driving alone in their car. The conditioning was so strong that today, 5 years later, the habit still holds for many in my town. The hysteria in the media over coronavirus and the policies of some localities convinced people to distance themselves indiscriminately from others, to get vaccinated unhesitatingly for COVID-19 with an experimental product. No matter what your level of risk, no matter the potential negative consequences. Some employers forced the vaccine on workers. Some friends or family members compelled this on their loved ones as a condition of visiting. As a result of such insistent messaging about COVID, some people became anxious enough to turn against others who questioned these practices and policies or who did not comply. Not only did this create situations of discomfort between strangers, even friendships and family ties were strained by this. The COVID story was a modern example of the tremendous power of messaging over those that trust the messenger. To protect ourselves from future scenarios like this, it behooves us to remember to carefully evaluate sources of information, to stay curious about and to compare diverse perspectives, to remain calm in the face of a claimed threat or uncertainty. It is time to bring this presentation to a conclusion, even though there is additional pertinent information that I have not been able to include due to my own limitations and the pressures of time. I might continue with this theme in the future if it seems like the right thing to do. Baha'u'llah instructed us, quote, "Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements." The following passage, written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi and directed to young people, advises us of some of these needs and requirements. Quote, "The present condition of the world, its economic instability, social dissensions, political dissatisfaction, and international distrust should awaken the youth from their slumber and make them inquire what the future is going to bring. It is surely they who will suffer most if some calamity sweeps over the world. They should therefore open their eyes to the existing conditions, study the evil forces that are at play, and then, with a concerted effort, arise and bring about the necessary reforms. Reforms that shall contain within their scope the spiritual as well as the social and political phases of human life." In this presentation, I have attempted to emphasize the importance of pursuing truth and evaluating information from a posture of neutrality and skepticism in order to more effectively study existing conditions and the forces that are at play. To support my theme, I have shared quotations from the Baha'i writings that I believe are pertinent and have given examples from history to illustrate my points. We must continue to equip ourselves for the future. In 2024, users of ChatGPT, a computer program designed to simulate conversation with another human, noticed that the program was delivering surprisingly biased answers, perhaps reflecting the limitations of the database of information it had consulted to formulate the answers, or maybe reflecting an intentional agenda of its human programmers. Was this accidental? Was it deliberate? It is very difficult in 2025 to understand current events and to pursue truth because all of the established sources of information have become corrupted, and it is probably going to become even more challenging moving forward with the evolution of artificial intelligence, which will confer abilities of manipulation that we might not detect or be prepared for. Imagine the virtually unlimited computing and processing power of AI being programmed to treat various topics and keywords differently, by promoting some things and hiding others, by fabricating a false representation of public opinion, and so on. It is vital to commit yourself to being ever mindful of this idea, You control what you pay attention to, and you don't need to allow anyone, any entity, to dominate a portion of your finite life with whatever narrative they want to force into your consciousness, or with whatever content is automatically served up to you by algorithm or artificial intelligence. A good question to ask yourself in the moment is, if I didn't have this screen in front of me, what would my world look like? Chances are it would be a lot more peaceful and beautiful, a lot more creative and rich than whatever is being portrayed to you via a screen or force-fed to you by a technology or media company. We are social creatures, often trusting of others, and stories attract us, so we can easily fall victim to media reports presented by glossy and professional-looking sources. Stay neutral. Demand evidence. Practice skepticism. We must strive to avoid being naive, complacent, indifferent. A position of ignorance or carelessness might seem less stressful from one perspective, but at what cost? Educate your network and community to gain an awareness of these social forces, because all of us are surrounded by individuals who are captured by the daily bombardment of propaganda via electronic device, television, radio, newspaper, that is crafted to sway people one way or another. We need to appreciate how, by remaining skeptical and neutral, we buy ourselves time to investigate matters independently, regardless of whether we ever arrive at a point of feeling a need to comment publicly or declare a position. This discipline of analyzing evidence fortifies our capacity for intellectual self-defense. Everything they say on TV sounds believable and convincing. Often it is wrong. In the age of fifth-generation warfare, the target is your mind, your thoughts, and beliefs. And we delude ourselves if we imagine that the aforementioned platforms and centers of power have our best interests at heart. Keeping a healthy distance from narratives of all sorts protects us from getting swept up in the potential quicksand-like dangers of public opinion. It helps us steer clear of the madness of crowds. It helps us to appreciate the importance of keeping our focus on the Baha'i model in order to build pathways leading toward the prosperity of humankind, rather than being engulfed and co-opted and neutralized by Machiavellian strategies now being employed by forces across the globe. Online experiences do have some interesting capabilities and advantages, such as video chats or meetings between physically distant people, creative and productive applications of many kinds, and rapid access to information. But in-person connections humanize experiences in a special way. They allow us to interact more fully and carefully with the other person, and they provide an analog hack to the many types of digital internet trickery. Abdu'l-Baha, during his final years on Earth, predicted that Baha'is in the West would experience severe mental tests. I don't know if he explained it in more detail. I won't speculate about what he meant. Clearly, however, it is up to you as an individual to decide which thoughts you will allow to occupy your mind, how you will dedicate your life, and where you will place your allegiances. It is precisely because the major power centers that traffic in communication and information are often not acting in your best interest that it falls to you to remain constantly aware of Baha'u'llah's advice, that you must see with your own eyes, hear with your own ears, and not automatically adopt the perspective of others, no matter who or what the source is. If you believe something simply because you heard someone else say it, or because you somehow absorbed the information from your environment with no tangible evidence to substantiate it, do you really know that thing to be true? Or is that thing you think you believe just something other people repeat? Abdu'l-Baha said, quote, "Blind imitation of the past will stunt the mind, but once every soul inquireth into truth, society will be freed from the darkness of continually repeating the past. The lesson I keep having to learn in my life is people are different, and some of them will have perspectives that differ from yours. If we can practice staying calm, not fixated or attached, if we can be flexible, neutral, skeptical in the face of various claims and narratives propagated relentlessly by popular culture and media, if we can refrain from becoming upset by or judging the opinions of others, if we can calmly listen with curiosity and politeness without feeling the need to argue, this will help us prioritize unity and harmony and connection above all else when we are faced with inevitable differing perspectives. It is crucial to avoid unproductive arguments. If the person in your presence cannot civilly discuss a certain topic at this time, make a detour. Find a more agreeable subject of discussion. Remain civil. Remain curious about the perspective of others. Maintain a connection. Yet, stay skeptical and neutral. Abdu'l-Baha said, quote, "Peace must first be established among individuals until it leadeth in the end to peace among nations." Thanks for listening.